The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you. Or wonders they say shall never cease to happen. The French National Assembly did something unexpected. In a unanimous vote, they symbolically repealed the Code Noir, the infamous 17th century Black Code that regulated slavery, violence, and French colonial power for generations. French President Emmanuel Macron threw his weight behind the bill, stating that France's centuries-old silence on the matter wasn't an oversight, but a big offense. It sounds noble on paper. It looks like a country finally reckoning with its dark past. But we have to look closer and ask the tough questions. Why now? Why did it take nearly 2 centuries to symbolically repeal a law that was implicitly buried in 1448? And more importantly, how does this sudden moral awakening link directly to France's unraveling influence in the Sahel? To understand the weight of this move, we first need to look at what the Code Noir actually was. Enacted in 1685 under King Louis XIV, this set of articles laid down the law for French colonies. It legally defined human beings as furniture that could be bought, sold, and inherited. It weaponized religion, forcing the baptism of enslaved people into Catholicism. It institutionalized terrifying physical violence, explicitly permitting horrific corporate punishment like branding, ear removal, and execution of fugitives. For hundreds of years, this code was the bedrock of French economic wealth, fueling the brutal human trafficking networks of the triangular trade.
France's Assemblée nationale has voted unanimously to symbolically repeal the Black Code, colonial-era decrees governing slavery, after President Emmanuel Macron endorsed the bill last week. But what exactly was the Black Code? It's a set of articles that asserted and defined the French monarchy's control over its colonies from the 17th century onwards. Slaves were then considered as furniture and could be bought, sold, and inherited. Originally, these texts were called an ordonnance and then an edict. According to historians, the term Code Noir, or Black Code, only appeared in the 18th century. To understand its importance in slavery, let's take a look at this period of history. Since the 16th century, France, like other world powers, participated in human trafficking. This was called the triangular trade. Slaves deported from the African continent were used as labor in America to grow sugarcane, cotton, and tobacco. It was during this period that France became a major colonial empire, with slave owners that ruled over their plantations. To assert his power over these remote territories, Louis XIV commissioned his minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, to write an ordinance to regulate the trade. His son, Jean-Baptiste Antoine Colbert, later completed the task. The ordinance was enacted in 1685, and it created an exemption for these territories from French law, because slavery was supposed to be banned in France at the time. The text first concerned Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Saint-Christophe, and was extended to the French part of Saint-Domingue in 1687, and then to French Guiana in 1704. Two further versions of the text were enacted by Louis XV for the Mascarin Islands and Louisiana. These texts regulated the economy, daily life, and religion, especially for slaves. First, slaves had to be baptized and live according to Catholicism. For repeat fugitives, the code allowed for extremely violent corporal punishments, such as branding, ear removal, and the death penalty. This was in order to prevent rebellion and escape. Apart from these cases, masters were forbidden to torture slaves, but this wasn't always respected. The code also included measures to discipline the behavior of masters, who were obliged to feed and clothe their slaves or face prosecution. It also allowed for slaves to be freed by their owners. The Black Code has not been in effect in France since 1848, when the decree abolishing slavery implicitly repealed it. So there was no law specifically abolishing the code.
So something really interesting happened in France today. Let's talk about it. So today, in the year of our Lord 2026, after 339 years, the French government has finally struck down its last slave codes, les Codes Noirs. Let's talk about it. So, Le Code Noir, what exactly is that? Le Code Noir in English means the Black Code, and these were the laws that were put in place in 1648 to govern the institution of slavery in France's American colonies. See, in the 15th and 16th century, there was a mad dash by a lot of the major powers in Europe. I'm talking about France, Spain, Portugal, England, Denmark. These guys were all going absolutely feral to try and take colonies in the Americas and to populate them with workers to produce goods for them. And a major part of that was the transatlantic slave trade. Now, the transatlantic slave trade was one leg of a three-part sort of industry, economy, if you will, also known as the triangular trade. It started with collecting or acquiring enslaved Africans off the coast of West and Central Africa, moving them across the Atlantic into the American colonies where they would work on various plantations, tobacco, sugar, cotton, what have you. And whatever raw goods they produced would then be sent to Europe, where they would be turned into finished goods and then returned to or sent to West Africa, where they would be sold in exchange for, get it, more slaves. In Article 31, if a slave strikes his master in the face and draws blood, so even if it's an accident, if they strike their master's face and draw blood, and this could be the master, the mistress, or any of their children, they will be punished by death. In fact, if you look at the one below this, so this is Article 38, Article 38 says a fugitive slave who has been on the run for more than a month from the day his master reports his escape to the police, he will have his ear cut off and he will be branded with a fleur de lis. And if he does it again, he'll have another ear cut off and he'll be branded again. And if he does it one more time, he will be executed. And if you look at Article 2, all enslaved persons essentially will be baptized as Roman Catholics. So there are stories of enslaved people disembarking from the ships, and as they walk through, they are being sprinkled with holy water by a priest and baptized into Roman Catholicism. And this had to be done like right away. And there's other stuff too. For example, if you harbor an escaped slave, you would then be forced to pay 300 bags of sugar per day that slave is seeking refuge in your home. Probably one of the wildest ones has to be Article 44, where people who are enslaved are literally classified as meubles or furniture. For some reason, the English translation says charges, but that's just whitewashing slavery. So these laws were in place for years, up until the late 18th century when France had its revolution, and part of that revolution was supposed to be an end to slavery. But then, of course, that didn't go over well when Napoleon became the Emperor of France, and when Haiti had its revolution, they needed to reestablish control over the colonies and find money to pay for the many wars that Napoleon planned to fight, so slavery was reinstituted. The black codes were put back in place. In fact, they were further refined under Napoleon, and they stayed in place until 1848. So as of 1848, when slavery was officially banished in the French Empire, the black codes lost their teeth, and they were still the law of the land. In fact, they stayed the law of the land until 178 years later, today, when the French government struck them down. I also want you guys to remember to put all of this in context, okay? France had these laws on the books for 178 years after they had abolished slavery. They've had 178 years to take care of it. But if you consider the fact that France forced Haiti to pay reparations up until the early 2000s for the slaves that they lost because of a revolution, because those slaves fought for their own freedom, if we consider the fact that France abstained from voting for a resolution that named slavery as the worst crime against humanity in history, and the fact that France is sort of losing its former colonies who are economically breaking away from it and going somewhere else, this just seems like low-hanging fruit to grasp at and somehow treat as a victory when this is 339 years overdue. But yeah, keep reading. Have a good night.
Though slavery was eventually abolished in 1848, the Code Noir was never officially and specifically erased by French law, an unspoken testament to the empire. So, why are Macron and the French government suddenly so eager to wipe this off the books today? The answer doesn't lie in the archives of Paris. It lies in the changing geopolitical landscape of West Africa and the Sahel region specifically. For the past several years, France's modern influence in Africa, often criticized as Francafrique, has been collapsing across the Sahel from Mali and Burkina Faso to Niger. The narrative has fundamentally shifted. Massive public protests, military transitions, realignment have seen French troops evicted and French dominance openly rejected. This brings us to the core of the issue, the deep hypocrisy of this symbolic gesture. Macron is using the National Assembly to send a strong message to Africa and the Sahel. Look, we have changed. We are no longer that old colonial power, never. But a symbolic repeal of 340 years old decree costs nothing. It doesn't change the unfair trade agreements. It doesn't pay reparations for stolen wealth, resources, or historic trauma. It doesn't undo decades of political interference in sovereign African states. It is a political PR designed to deflect from current geopolitical failures, while France pretends to rewrite its history. It is desperately trying to secure its future access to African resources and maintain its fading global status. They want Africans to believe that a vote in Paris changes the narrative on the ground in Africa. But no. But the frontline narrative is clear. True partnership cannot be built on symbolic gestures, while structural inequality remains intact. You cannot heal centuries of exploitation with a performative vote, especially when the vote is only cast because you are losing your grip on geopolitical influence. Africa is waking up, changing its alliances, and demanding respect based on sovereignty, not historical charity. Macron's symbolic repeal is too little, too late. The people of the Sahel and the wider continent have already moved past waiting for France's validation. They are writing their own history now. What do you think about this move by the French National Assembly? Is it a step towards genuine reconciliation, or is it just another display of political damage control? Let me know in the comments below. And please, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. This is the latest, the Chin One, and you are welcome to my platform. Hit the notification and select all. It's amazing, you understand, that as much as they're trying to show us how they have changed, they keep exposing how they need Africa and how they cannot live without Africa. And we are proving to them we have moved on, and the time of waiting for their validation is over. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's colonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Europe and in France.